Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
I'm going to open the hood, go under here, release lever, there's a little indicator, a little pictograph of a car, and the release lever for the hood is here. Lift up on the hood, find the safety, it's right here above the grille, so push it to the passenger side, and just put the prop rod up. You can put your hood in the service position by lifting it up. And then if you follow down here, you put the prop rod in this extra little hole here on the hood. And we'll let that sit there. Now your hood's open higher and you've got some more space to work. We use a 10mm open-ended wrench. We're going to disconnect the negative battery terminal. Just loosen it up. You don't have to thread it all the way off. Just get it to a point where it's loose and it'll slide off the battery terminal. And we'll put it aside here. Use a trim clip tool. I'm going to pop these two clips out, holding air in this air intake duct. Just pry them up. And put them aside, you can reuse them. Lift up this intake duct and it'll kind of slide out of the air box. And we can put that aside. We're going to remove the protective covers from the drive belts. I'm going to start with this one over here. I will use a 10mm socket, an extension, and a ratchet. Put it aside so we can reuse it. And grab this one here, thread it out with my fingers, and I'll put that cover aside with the bolts. I want to remove the metal cover here that's over the alternator. I'm going to start with this 10mm bolt over here, using the same 10mm socket, ratchet, and extension. Now it won't come off because it's bolted here where the alternator bolt goes through, so I need to loosen that. This is a 12mm head bolt. You can use a 12mm socket, extension, and ratchet. You just have to loosen it up because it's like a U shape to it. And then this will slide right off. And very important to loosen the tensioner for the alternator. You need to loosen the 12mm bolt that's under here before you loosen the tensioning bolt, because otherwise it's not going to move. This locks it in place. So I use my 12mm socket, extension, and ratchet. I'll loosen this up, and then I can go up here with it and loosen this. This bolt is new. Yours might be kind of rusty. We had this off before and it already broke from being too rusty. So you'll want to use some sort of rust penetrant on this probably. But just loosen it up. This belt will start to get loose. The alternator will move because it's also loosened here. Should get to a point where it's pretty loose and it'll just come right off. Get it off the crank pulley and just put this belt aside. I'm going to loosen this 12mm nut down here for the tensioner pulley for the AC belt. Using a 12mm socket, ratchet. Get it free, you don't need to take it all the way off. I'm going to spray some rust penetrant on the tensioning bolt. Use the 12mm socket, extension, ratchet, we'll loosen it up. You just want to make sure that you definitely loosen this lock nut first, because if you try to loosen the tensioning bolt, the part that holds this pulley on can either be plastic or sometimes it's a real soft metal and you can break it if you don't loosen that lock nut. Just gonna keep loosening it so I can get the belt off. Pop the belt off and put it aside. I'm going to take a 22mm socket and a breaker bar. I need to loosen the crank pulley bolt. I'm going to try doing it without holding the crank pulley right now. I might be able to get it to move. Nope. What we're going to do is remove that crank pulley bolt. without using a special tool. But in the process, we're going to ruin the alternator belt because we're going to loop the alternator belt around the crank pulley and then around the alternator pulley and then down, and it's going to kind of fold over itself. I'm going to wedge it in here. And what you do when you go to loosen this, it's going to tighten up against it. And we're going to pull against it. Break that free. Make sure that's loose. And yep, the bolt is loose, so I can spin it out with my fingers. Now I can move this a little bit here, get the belt off, but it does ruin the belt, so I put a crease in it, and you'll have to replace this belt, but that is a way to do it without having the special tool to hold the crank pulley. Now that bolt's loose, just thread it out by hand. And pull the crank pulley off. Kind of wiggle it back and forth, get it loose. Careful not to drop it. So this is your crank pulley and your harmonic balancer, same thing. Now reinstall the harmonic balancer. And we're going to find the keyway for it. Match that up, make sure the key should be in there on the crankshaft. And we'll put in our new crank pulley bolts. And no thread locker on here, just some light grease or oil, so there's some on there. So I'll get this into place. So I'm going to try to line it up. There it is. Once you find it, it'll slide right on. Bolt started. We're going to use the alternator belt that we already ruined. And we're going to put this on here in the opposite direction the way we used it to take it off. Set the initial torque at 33 foot-pounds. Clicks, you're all set. Use our larger torque wrench, and we're going to torque this to 133 foot-pounds now. Once it clicks, you're all set. So now I'm going to reach down with my regular ratchet and just turn this a little bit backwards just to release that. We'll take that off. That works really well, but you can see it definitely ruins the belt. Reinstall air conditioner belt. That goes on the inside. And down around the tensioner, and up over the AC compressor. Make sure it's sitting in all the pulley ribs. There's a 12mm socket, ratchet. And it's pretty long. I'm starting to tighten this up, and I can feel the belt tension starting to increase. So I'm just going to go a little bit more. You don't want to over tension it. You should have a little bit of deflection, but you also don't want so much that it slips on you. That feels pretty good. Then we go down. You need to tighten the locking nut here on the pulley. just so it gets tight. Then you stop. The AC belt is tensioned. We're going to install our new alternator and power steering belts. I'm going to start on the crank. Whatever way is easier to get it on here. Make sure it's fully seated. Sometimes that holds you up. There it is. Around all the pulleys. Tension the alternator up. The tensioner bolt, we had trouble with it before. It was sticking, and replaced it. And there's a little bit of copper never sees on there. And again, just check this belt. That feels pretty good. Now we'll tighten down the lock bolt here. So now you've got to put your protective cover on here. With these little ears, they're going to go around this bolt here. Kind of goes in between this washer and this other washer. Let's see if I can get this out with the gloves on. I'll just slide into here. It lowers down. You can actually put this bolt in so it's adjusted. Just put it in my hand right now. Now I'll tighten up the alternator mounting bolts. Once you feel it get tight, you should be all set. You can tighten up this bolt here. Feel like it tight, just stop. This is a little plastic cover, go over the AC compressor. Install this bolt here. This one installed. These don't have to be super tight, they're just holding on this plastic. Once it stops, it's tight enough. And the same for this one. And that one's all set. Reinstall the intake duct, slide into the air box. We'll line it up on the radiator support. Push the little push clips back in. Reconnect the battery. The job is complete.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.